Colleagues, we're going to start shortly. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to get a coffee. And I'd like to invite the speakers for the stage, please. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, good morning. My name is Matthew Griffiths, and I work for the OECD in the Environment Directorate, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this 11th session of the OECD Roundtable on Water Financing. For this edition, we've organised the Roundtable in partnership with the European Commission, and the meeting will have a focus on the EU's Eastern partner countries. And we're delighted to welcome delegates from Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Republic of Moldova, and Ukraine. Welcome, everyone. This meeting is in hybrid mode. We have around 100 people registered to come in person across the 2 days, and many more online. The meeting will be recorded, and for information, the meeting is supported by translation into English, Ukrainian, and English, Russian languages, so please feel free to get the headsets as you need. We want to make the meeting and the panel sessions interactive, and participants in the room are invited to raise their flags if they want to intervene. And colleagues online can use the Q&A session on the Zoom, and the OECD team will make sure the questions are brought to the moderator's attention. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the OECD's Director of Environment, Joe Tyndall, to make a welcome address. Joe is joining us online from Paris. And Joe, can you hear us?
I can hear you, and hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. If we can show Joe's screen as well, please, colleagues.
Thanks very much. I wasn't sure where I was placed in the screen, so that's good to see this. Ladies and gentlemen, honourable ministers, it's my great pleasure to officially welcome you to the 11th meeting of the Roundtable on Financing Water. I wish I could be there with you in person, but most unfortunately the Roundtable is meeting at exactly the same time as the Environment Policy Committee, and that's required me to stay here in Paris. I was delighted to hear how broad the participation is today, having senior representatives and leaders from the water and finance communities, including governments, water utilities, public and private investors, development banks, international organisations and NGOs from all over the world have gathered in Brussels to discuss mobilising more and better financing to improve access to water and sanitation and ensure water scarcity water security in the EU's Eastern Partnership countries. In particular, I want to extend a warm welcome to the delegations from Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, the Republic of Moldova, and Ukraine. The OECD's Environment Directorate is about supporting countries to develop and implement policies based on evidence-based research and analysis. This is fundamental to financing a greener future and includes issues ranging from financing climate resilience and adaptation to accelerating the low-carbon industrial transition and supporting actions to protect and restore biodiversity. But frankly, few things are as critical, cross-cutting and desperately needed as financing water. There's no lack of potentially available funding for water security in the Eastern Partnership countries. According to OECD estimates presented in one of today's background documents, this could amount to over €1 billion. But we also know that the region's water investment needs are great and that existing funding must be much better used. Doing that would in turn facilitate access to additional funding. So that's why I'm particularly excited about this 11th Roundtable on Financing Water, which brings together experts from the water and the finance sectors, representing public, private and civil society organisations, all working together to bridge the gaps that exists. Since its inception in 2017, the Roundtable has focused on bridging the divide between professionals from the water and financial sectors, on raising the profile of water financing internationally, on identifying ways to overcome investment barriers, and on promoting innovative water-related investment strategies. Each Roundtable has had a specific thematic or regional focus. The 11th Roundtable's focus on the EU Eastern Partnership countries comes at a pivotal time for the region. While water availability varies considerably from one country to the next, every country is facing its own challenges in ensuring water security. And these challenges range from improving irrigation efficiency to expanding water services in a sustainable and inclusive manner to the most remote or hard to reach areas. At the same time, challenges associated with tackling deteriorating water quality and adapting to more frequent droughts and floods brought on by climate change, those issues also have to be tackled. Of course, Ukraine's water sector is facing specific challenges from Russia's ongoing war of aggression. And it's a topic I know we're going to hear more about from Minister Strelets. All of this is taking place against the backdrop of broader change in the region. Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia are all working towards membership of the European Union, while Armenia and Azerbaijan are collaborating closely with the EU. The Roundtable is going to discuss the finance implications, both domestic and international, of aligning with the EU acquis on water management, including adopting a river basin management approach to water resources planning. In this context, it's time for leaders and experts from the water and finance communities to sit together and find bold solutions based on evidence-based research and on the latest regional and global best practices. To this end, the sessions will address issues of particular importance to Europe's Eastern Partnership countries. These include improving investment decisions for the implementation of EU water legislation, lessons learned from assessing the enabling environment for investment in water security, the potential for application and reform of economic instruments, innovative approaches to mobilizing financing river basin management planning, as well as novel approaches such as nature-based solutions. So that's a wide-ranging but very pertinent agenda for the Roundtable. In addition, there's a side event launching the EU for Climate Resilience Programme that'll provide valuable insights into water management in the context of climate adaptation and resilience. Last but not least, I would like to warmly thank the Roundtable founding members, the Government of the Netherlands, the World Water Council, and the World Bank for their guidance and support. And of course, thank our co-convener for today's Roundtable, the European Commission. This Roundtable would not be possible without the strong and consistent financial support, vision, and leadership from the European Commission, and particularly from DG NEAR and DG Environment. Much of the background material for this Roundtable is the fruit of the EU for Environment, Water and Data Programme, which is the latest program in a long-standing history of innovative and collaborative efforts to support environmental improvements in Eastern partner countries. And the OECD is proud to be an implementing partner of this work alongside Austria, France, and the UNECE, all of whom are also represented in the room today. I wish everyone a really stimulating 2 days of discussions, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what comes out of the Roundtable. Thank you for the opportunity to address you, and again, my apologies for not being able to be there in person.
Dijo, many thanks for your opening remarks and for getting the meeting off to a good start. Thank you, and wishing you well with the EPOC meeting today. Okay, as Joe mentioned, the Roundtable was established in 2017 by the OECD, the Netherlands, the World Water Council, and the World Bank. So as our next speaker, I'm delighted to welcome Mieke van Ginneken, the Netherlands Special Envoy to Water, to make a keynote address. Mieke, please.
Thank you. The water sector is actually not a sector. Last night I was reading the economic and investment plan for Eastern Partnerships of the European Commission, which aims to mobilize 17 billion euros of investment by 2027. And if you do a simple word search to water, it's everywhere. It talks about water utilities, it has water under the environment chapter, it has water under the agricultural chapter, it has water under headings on city development. So talking about financing water is actually quite difficult because you talk about very different things because water is everywhere. So let me take a step back and look at who pays for water and who finances water in these diverse water investments. think it's important first to think at paying, because if you don't have payments, arranging for financing will be very difficult. If you ask yourself the question, who pays for water management and for water services? There's only a few answers possible. Users, polluters, and taxpayers. And that can be taxpayers in the country that you work in, or it can be international taxpayers through development aid or through subsidies. And we've said it for decades, let users pay, let polluters pay. And I think in principle we all agree with that, but we found out it's extremely difficult in practice because of political considerations and because of the difficulties of accounting for it, but mainly the pressure from certain groups that use water or pollute water. I think for water services, this is still reasonably simple, no? You can measure, send and collect bills for drinking water, for irrigation, for sewerage. But even there, time after time, we see that we actually don't let users or polluters pay. Cost recovery and translating the economic benefits of water management into a financial revenue stream is much more difficult for water management. Who do you send a bill for flood protection? Who do you send a bill for wetland restoration? And we know that water management and climate adaptation are classical public goods. So there's limits on recovering costs, which means that if users and polluters are not to be identified, national and international taxpayers will have to chip in. Before I go to financing, let me also ask the other question, the question the other way around, who does not pay for water? First order answer is farmers. Farmers use 80% of water around the world, sometimes 70, sometimes 90s in different countries. But often they do not pay. And a lot of agricultural subsidies actually subsidize water overuse and water pollution. Recent World Bank study found that governments are spending $635 billion per year on inefficient agricultural subsidies. OECD figures are similar. And because water is often subsidized, they lack incentive to be water efficient. You get groundwater overexploitation and also pollution because of fertilizer subsidies. So subsidy reform is part of financing the water sector. So water management is a public good, water services are a semi-public good, and we know it's difficult to generate much financial revenue. So it comes as no surprise that actually the private financing flows into the water sector or into these different activities that we call the water sector is actually low in most countries, not only in the countries we are discussing here, but also in a lot of the European Union countries. If you look at the OECD figures on climate finance, private climate finance, 9% of private climate finance internationally went to climate adaptation, hence to water, 91% to mitigation, because energy is easier to finance. And if you look at the public-private investment database from the World Bank that looks at all sectors and infrastructure and how much private sector finance goes in, water is consistently under 5%. I think it's at the moment it's 1.4%. And I've worked 17 years at the World Bank, tried to get that number up, and with my colleagues failed. So a lot of the finance comes from the public sector, and I think looking at public expenditure therefore is really important. I did some work on that at the World Bank 12 years ago, called that More, Better and Different Expenditure, still a title that's valid today. Just last month, the World Bank published a similar overview report on public spending on water. In broad outline, developing countries spend roughly 0.5% of GDP on water, mostly the same as what we calculated 12 years ago. I'll come back to that, but in the Netherlands we spent approximately 1% of GDP, and that's a higher GDP, so in absolute numbers that difference is quite big. I think what's also important in these reports, the most recent report, but it echoes a lot of the work that others have done in the past, only 72% out of every dollar budgeted is spent. So even if government budgets for water, it's not always spent. So there is a lot of improvement by just spending the money that we have. And donor funds are actually doing worse here than government funds. That's also something to say about the burden of administration of donor funds. So, a lot of complaining, a lot of what's going wrong. Let me try to come up with some novel ideas. That's what Joe invited us to do. First of all, at the heart of this is these predictable revenue streams. And I do think that water and climate adaptation requires distinct financing approaches. We need patient capital. Adaptation and water infrastructure last for decades and requires long maturities and low interest rates. Water projects are often complex and site-specific, and we're stuck in the paradigm of project-based finance. We are, as a globe, I mean, if you look at the IFIs, we all mimic, even with public international financing, investment banking, and I'm not sure that's actually what's going to get us there, no? In the Netherlands, I sometimes think, what would have happened to our flood protection if we would have to follow World Bank requirements for every coastal protection project we invest in? I leave the answer up to you. So I think we need to think about less transaction-intensive sector-wide financing approaches. Let me get to the Netherlands. All our water service providers are publicly owned and operated. Both are water utilities for drinking water, but let me focus on our water authorities which deal with flood protection, water quality and water allocation. There's special level of government. They're our oldest democratic institutions. They're in between our municipalities and our provinces. And they can tax. They have a tax authority. They collect. We have a nice collection ratio, over 97%. People pay for these services because they are provided well. And that's a virtuous cycle. This is the kind of things we need to get to. Because this makes them creditworthy. They have their own bank, a public bank that's owned by the water authorities and the provinces. And this bank goes to the private market and at AAA rates actually crowds in financing. We also centrally have a Delta Fund, which is a long-term planning. And again, the central government goes to the private capital market and raises blue bonds in October, $5 billion of blue bonds from the capital markets at a very attractive price. So we've kind of gotten out of that project-based paradigm. You can say, yeah, that's easy in the Netherlands. It's true that it's more difficult if you don't have this tradition. But let me take a very different example. In Tanzania, a country which is not famous for a tradition in this, the Tanza utility just raised a $10 million blue bond. So the question is, how do you get utilities, basin organizations, municipalities, cities, etc., credit-worthy, so that they can raise funds beyond this project paradigm? So to conclude, first of all, water management and water services are expensive. If you think about 1% of a GDP, that's a massive investment. And with climate change, this is only going to go up. I think we need to realize that we will never have enough financing in our sector. So smart financing is also about setting priorities for scarce public resources. And I just want to put a pin in that it always has impact on justice and on solidarity. Where we finance first, where we invest first, there's always winners and losers. So let's not just think that we can calculate this as engineers and as technocrats, because these are political decisions and they're hard political decisions, let alone about the subsidy reform that I refer to. Having said that, we need to live with scarce financial resources, but we also need to grow the pie. Otherwise, we will be nowhere. We need to attract more financing. That means translating the economic benefits into financial revenue streams. Without that, we will not be able to raise financing. Users pay, polluters pay, and taxpayers pay. And we need financing approaches if we want to scale up. This project by project approach will probably not get us there. So creditworthiness of utilities, cities, basin organizations and central governments is at the heart of this. I'm looking forward to our discussion because I think this is overdue, and I think that together we can really make sure that we have better, different and more financing for the water sector. Thank you.
To address, and you've framed beautifully there the extent of the challenges we're going to be discussing today, so thank you. And the roundtable, I know we're very grateful for the support and leadership and expertise from the Netherlands, so thank you for joining us this morning. As Joe mentioned, a lot of the work we do in partnership with the Eastern Partner countries is delivered in cooperation with DG NEAR, the European Commission, and I'm pleased to invite our next speaker, Severin Strohal from DG NEAR, to make some opening remarks. Severin, please.
Thanks a lot, Matthew. Good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot to the participants, to the panel here to join us for this joint event. So welcome to the Special Envoy from the Netherlands, the Minister from Ukraine, and the Deputy Ministers from our partner countries. In Georgia and Armenia. Just wanted maybe to briefly touch indeed or echo some of the messages I think that were already extremely valuable that have been passed from the experience from the Netherlands. I think that we together, the European Union and our Eastern Partner countries, I think have very little doubt on the relevance that the water plays in the joint policy frameworks and dialogues that we have set up both at the bilateral and the regional level. I think whether we discuss economic reforms with Georgia, whether we work on the Ukraine growth facility or the Moldova growth plan, I think the questions of how do you indeed mainstream the use of water across the reforms that we're supporting, across the investments that we're supporting, I think is really central, be that on the questions of how to move up the agricultural sector, up the value chain so that that it can actually tap into the growth potential to the European Union, all the way to the questions of how can renewable energies contribute to the really central issue of energy security, and knowing that a lot of the renewables, by definition, when they're hydro, but also when they are solar, obviously are heavy water consumers. So I think we really need to continue to have this mainstreaming approach throughout our dialogue. I think, and in that sense, I think like Miki said, I think the economic and investment plan mirrors very much indeed the heavy focus that we put on the financing of this. And I think now on the financing side, because ultimately this is the topic of the conversation here, I think the economic investment plan has already, I think, mobilized 9.2 billion euros so far on supporting our joint investment priorities, be it in developing the private sector, access to finance, to transport, connectivity, energy, and whatnot. A lot of this indeed has found its way also into water projects. That said, I think clearly there is more that needs to be done. I think there's a lot more than can be done. So maybe just a couple of thoughts that I think, just to continue, ultimately, I think that the point for you to discuss also the difficult questions today, and to come back to us with new ideas on how we can use this money more effectively, more efficiently, to have a greater impact. Maybe some points here. I think one important one is that when you look at the issues that we face, in some ways the question of engineering and project development and project finance ultimately still stands out maybe as the easiest one. Nonetheless, that said, if we look at this is engineering financially and otherwise, is the question of how can we do this more in a more smart fashion. So how can you indeed find different ways of putting these models together? How can you attract more private sector co-funding? But I'll get back to that later. A much more difficult question already is how do you make sure that the point of investing is actually accompanied by regulatory reforms that ensure that these investments actually have the intended impact. So there, I think we've started also discussions with some of our partner countries on the very difficult questions that were just raised of who pays, right? So looking at agricultural subsidies, how the reform of the agricultural sector in particular, but not solely, also on the questions of the scaling up, moving up your manufacturing industrial productions over the next couple of years. Again, who pays? And that means you need to look at the question of regulating the water usage, water tariffs, and in that sense get to the very political question ultimately of who loses, and therefore how do you mitigate this. I think we've seen in Europe, just to say, because I think these are really shared challenges, I think there's clearly been, as you have seen in the protests that have also been happening in Brussels recently, that in that sense the losing side, if not brought into the dialogue early on, can absolutely also bring your reform efforts to a halt. So really keep this, I think, is nonetheless what we as I think public servants are here to do, is to put these political choices on the table and ultimately make sure that they accompany your investments, because otherwise the impact is more limited. Third point maybe is on regional cooperation. I think that that's also the point of the Eastern Partnership, really, to have that dialogue. A lot of the water basins are shared water basins, a lot of the water resources are shared. So whether it's about hydroelectric production, whether it's about water basin management, ultimately, and this again calls for political solution and political dialogue and cooperation, is finding a joint way of managing scarce resources. I think there's very, very clear awareness. I don't think I need to tell you that this this can lead to tensions, regional bilateral tensions that obviously ideally are dealt with literally upstream. Third point maybe is then on the private sector. I think that are also very much welcome here today. I think it's very clear that we cannot just through the public hands solve these questions alone, and they really then to think really how leveraging financing can also bring in the private sector into the dialogue, into the model, but in a way that doesn't focus purely on the short-term returns on investments. As ultimately, for example, irrigation projects then tend to just scale up, indeed make up for much more effective water usage, but scale out ultimately the land usage and therefore not necessarily mitigate the water usage per se or the impact it has on water levels. So how do we bring in the private sector in a way that helps us leverage capital, but nonetheless creates also patient capital? And this is maybe my encouragement really for you today. I think the EU through the economic investments provides the patient capital, and in that sense we really work closely with our partner institutions, the IFIs, to bring together models that allow to make this patient capital bring fruit. But I think, as was rightly said, the question is how can we now find smart solutions that ultimately scale up to bring, I think, to make this capital more effective maybe than it currently is in delivering on your and our joint policy objectives. So I really look forward, I think, to today's discussions to contribute to the thinking also of our partner banks, the KfW, EIB, EBRD, in the development of their project pipeline, which they then obviously bring also to us. But I look also to you to really think how these investments can fit or will fit into regulatory broader reforms and frameworks that address some of the challenges that were already mentioned or they just mentioned. And just to say that in that sense, we look also to continue, I think, what is very much a joint effort. So I think we've had a Team Europe approach to this, working very closely with the EU member states that are really very, very much thankful for making this a joint effort, and that are also here today. and that our contribution will continue to be at your disposal, be that through our Twinnings, TIEX, or other instruments and tools that also can provide sort of very specific support to your in terms of technical assistance. Maybe just a side note, indeed, I think, as Joe mentioned earlier on, we have the pleasure also of launching today the EU for Climate Resilience, which is a regional program which I think will benefit all of you. I think ahead of the COP29, which will take place in Baku, in the Eastern Partnership, I just wanted to really flag that here as well, ultimately we face very similar challenges of how do we bring limited yet patient capital to have a greater impact. So you please also really consider that project as a contribution to developing the solutions jointly, but also rapidly, because ultimately, unfortunately, time is really running out on that front as well. So with this, and hopefully not having put too much pressure on your day, I hope you'll enjoy it nonetheless. I think thank you very much for being here, and look very much forward to the outcome of the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Severin, and no, not too much pressure at all, so thank you very much. So Joe, Mika and Severin have set the scene for our meeting. We know the challenges that we face, we know what we're going to be discussing today. So now I'd like to turn to our officials from Eastern Partner countries to make their introductions, share their hopes, share their ideas and their priorities around this issue of water financing. And firstly, I'd like to welcome Minister Ruslan Strelets. He's the Minister of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine. Before making his intervention, Minister Strelets and his team have prepared a short video that they would like to share. So I'll invite the team to share the video. It's about 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll give the floor to the Minister.
These are not Martian rocks. This is Turkey. It is a beauty that is not man-made. These are not lunar landscapes. This is the Sahara. It is a beauty that is not man-made.
Oh, okay.
These are not endless green pastures. This is a river, the Ukrainian Dnipro River, and what the Russians did to it. Within a matter of hours, the water rose by 11 meters and covered 80 towns and villages on both banks of the Dnipro. 600 square kilometers were flooded. The survivors had to be evacuated from the disaster area under constant shelling. The preliminary estimate of damage has already reached more than 3.5 billion euros. The operation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is under threat. The local population is left without drinking water and electricity. Agricultural lands are also without water. This is a blow to global food security. The destruction of the dam caused an environmental disaster, desalination of the Black Sea, pollution due to oil leaks and mine drift, death of rare species of animals, and flooding of protected European sanctuary areas. The water has gone. Nature is healing the wounds. But the consequences of the eco-terror will be felt for decades. Each and every crime committed by Russia against the environment must be punished. This is one of the objectives of Point 8 of President Zelensky's peace formula. Bringing the perpetrators to justice is a step towards preventing eco-terrorism in the future for all countries of the world, without exception. For the sake of future generations, for the sake of justice, for the sake of nature.
Minister Strelets, thank you for sharing that extremely powerful video with us. And please, I'd like to welcome you to the stage to give your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleagues. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this event, and not only to speak, but also to show. Today's roundtable name is Finance and the Water. But together with finance and the water, we are talking about saving the water, maybe something else. But we have a new challenge. And we have to remember that today we must protect the water. And protect, I mean protect from Russian aggression. You have seen the results of Russian aggression, and to finance something, we need to have something, to have enough. Today's topic is extremely important for Ukraine, and we are talking about water, saving water, protecting water, financing water, not only here, but also on Green Week yesterday. Water is life. It is possible not only where there are enough water resources. Ukraine's rank 85th out of 164 countries in terms of water deficit. Russia's armed aggression is making our path to good water quality even more and more difficult. Despite the fact that we are at the war today, we are already implementing European standards in Ukraine legislation. We are already thinking about how to achieve good water quality. We don't just want to fulfill the conditions documented in the association agreement and the Ukraine facility. We want to build a modern European country that will take its rightful place in the European family. Ukraine is a candidate for the EU. Over the past 2 years, we have made a huge progress in implementation European reforms. The European Commission assessment of our progress is 4 out of 5. Despite Russia's aggressive war, the European Commission noticed significant progress in the implementation of the water quality chapter. The European integration of national water law is a protection tool for the future restorations of river basins. For the first time in the history of Ukraine's independence, we are constantly communicating with the EU countries on water management, and not only with EU countries, but also with our neighbors. 2 days ago, I was in Moldova, in Chisinau, and had a discussion with my colleagues, Minister of Environmental Protection of Moldova, and we have a new challenge. We have a lack of water today in our joint river. And I hope that we will find the good solution how to bring back water to the river. I'm fully convinced that it's absolutely possible, but we need to work together, we need to think, and we need to find this solution together with the expert. But sometimes we need the support, and not only the financial support, but also military support. Because you understand that if, for example, Russian missile will come to the dam, we will have second Kakhovka. And it will be a challenge not only for Ukraine, but also for Moldova, because 80% of water, fresh water for people, Moldova taken from Dniester. Dniester beginning, in relations of Moldova and Ukraine. Dniester begins in Ukraine, then Moldova, and then Ukraine. If we will not have the Patriot system, if we will not protect the dams, it will be a challenge for Moldova also. And everybody who is here today have to understand it. Understand. Maybe this video gives the opportunity to you to feel it maybe in 1%, but multiply it in 100, and you can imagine the everyday life of Ukraine, what could be the everyday life of our neighbors without water. The goal remains the same: to ensure access to water and guarantee its good conditions. We also want fair and transparent rules. For this purpose, we have already approximated the legislation with the EU laws. Basin Council are successfully operating in Ukraine. The water monitoring system is being developed. 4 modern laboratories are successfully operating. In 2023, our laboratories made 304,000 analyses, and now we show these results on our special application EcoZagroza, EcoThreat. You can download it and use it, and you will see the everyday analysis. This is not only information for government or for our friends, for partners. This is information for people all over the world to understand the real situation and the real quality of Ukrainian water. We have established cross-border relations with the neighboring countries in the fields of water management. We continue to work with EU countries on the sustainable management of the Danube River. Together with Romania, we settled a 20-year dispute over compliance with the ESPA Convention during the construction of the Danube-Black Sea Channel. Together with Moldova and Romania, we strengthened cooperations in the Danube region and signed the Declaration on Integrated Management of the Prut River Basin. And I'm fully convinced that this work will continue this year. 2024 was the year of continued implementation of the legislation. The next steps are to approve environmental standards for surface water quality, improve water monitoring, and have the government approve river basin management plans. This is a part of our obligation, and I fully believe that it's absolutely possible in July, August this year. Over the next 2 months, 9 management plans for the Ukrainian main river basins will be approved by the government of Ukraine. They have already undergone public hearing. We have come a long way in a record year and a half. The draft river basin management plans are in line with the EU Water Directive. This is one of the most expensive directives in the European Union. I fully agree. We already understand how much it will cost for Ukraine. Rent and tax payment for the use of water resources don't cover the costs necessary to achieve good quality. The payback of water services is about 30%. A total of 1,635 river basin plan measures are needed. The investment requirement for the first 6-year cycle is 8.2 billion euros. We are already counting on the support of our partners in implementation of these measures. Water resources require our unity, joint efforts, and joint projects. Today, more than ever, we understand that the issue of good water quality is the matter of national security and not only for Ukraine. As a result of the hostilities, 430 facilities were occupied and destroyed, and 354 real estate objects of the water infrastructure were damaged. The total needs for restoration and reconstruction are estimated at almost 10 billion euros. Damage to water resource due to the hostilities is currently almost 2 billion euros. The damage caused by the destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power station dam is 3.5 billion euros. Under the condition of the military budget, we are now looking for the way to balance the use of water resource and ensure the availability of water for every Ukrainian. To this end, the government of Ukraine has developed a concept of reforming the water sector of Ukraine and establishing the national joint stock company, which named Water of Ukraine. We are finding new models, because sometimes we are talking about investments in water. But what is investments? Investments, if you are given the money and you want to take the profit. So we found the model to make the investment in water a reality. The creation of the National Joint Stock Company, Water of Ukraine, will allow us not only to use water resource rationality, but also to ensure additional GDP growth. The goals of the newly created company are as follows: applying transparent market mechanism for business and affordable, high-quality water for people. 1.3 billion euro in investments to repair and modernize water supply infrastructure. Optimizing cost by implementing a new management system. Supporting the economy by increasing the localization of equipment production. Implementing all these today requires a lot of effort and resources. We need to restore the damaged hydraulic infrastructure and implement management plan measures to achieve good water quality. All this requires your support of our partners. After all, the environmental has no border. Rivers has no borders. We share their waters with our neighbors, with EU countries, and not only EU countries. Everyone who cares about the environmental safety of Europe and the good condition of our water bodies. Join our stock company and let's work together for future of our kids, for future of future generation. Glory to Ukraine! Slava Ukraini!
Minister, thank you very much for those words. And I know you have to leave the panel at 10 for another appointment. I just want to say you shared there the support of the EU for Environment, Water and Data programme, in particular on river basin management planning. And I know I can speak on behalf of our implementing partners, Environment Agency Austria, Austrian Development Agency, International Office of Water and UNECE. It's really a privilege for us to work so closely with you and your colleagues at this time. And the dedication, the professionalism of the water experts in Ukraine, with the pressure that they're under at the moment, it's really staggering. So thank you to you and your team for everything, and we're with you. Okay, Minister needs to leave now, but thank you for joining us, Minister. Now, our next speaker on stage with me, I have Deputy Minister of Environment from Armenia, Mr. Tigran Gabrielan. Tigran, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Tigran Gabrielan, Deputy Minister of Environment of the Republic of Armenia. On behalf of Minister of Environment, I would like to welcome all the participants of today's high-level workshop and stress the importance of this roundtable on the financing water. As many of you are aware, in 2017, Armenia signed a comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement, SEPA, with the European Union, which contained ambitious commitment to reform water policies and implemented EU water-related directives. SEPA entered into force on March 1, 2021, and in the area of water quality and resource management, Armenia undertook obligation of the approximation of the following EU directives: EU Water Framework Directives, Urban Wastewater Directives, Drinking Water Directives, Nitrate Directives, and Flood Directives. These SEPAs will be guiding on the water sector policy and planning over the next decade, and the water sector strategy, which is currently developing, will take into account approximation with the EU water assuries. While Armenia has achieved significant progress in the direction, still a lot remains to be done over the coming years. One of the key challenges that Armenia currently faces for current and future water planning relate to policy coherence in the water sector. In this regard, I would like to stress the importance of the national policy dialogue in water sector supported by the EU, which is a platform where key stakeholders meet to discuss and advance water policy reforms. It is fed by a robust analytical work and international good practice. In Armenia, NPD was launched in 2006, and already 21 meetings in the NPD steering committees were held since then. In 2023, the composition of the NPD was updated and extended, and currently is include about 35 representatives: Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Territorial Administration and Infrastructure, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Economy, Statistical Committee, Public Service Regulatory Commission, Regional Administration, as well as universities, institute, non-governmental organization. Finally, noting importance of the OECD work on financing water in Armenia, supported by the EU, we very much hope that this effort will continue, given that challenge Armenia still faces in key water finance-related policy objectives. These include the objectives around EU alignment under SEPA and financing of river-based management plan, given that program with implementation lags for many of the measures included in the officially adopted 5 RMBMPs in Armenia due to lack of finance. Many thanks for your attention, and I wish all of us fruitful discussion over the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
Deputy Minister, many thanks, and a little spoiler alert, Deputy Minister will be back again in the agenda just before lunch to share some concrete examples of cooperation that OECD has done with Armenia on financing water. Our next speaker, also on stage representing Georgia, we have Mzia Georgiani, the Deputy Minister of Regional Development and Infrastructure. Please.
Thank you, and very good morning. Definitely, I'm really pleased to be part of this today's discussions, and we will have the possibility to discuss more deeply what kind of achievement that the country we have in respect of the water regulation and what kind of activities we are doing in Georgia, and of course what is needed to be done. What we see and what we are talking about the water, and when we are talking about the financing, this is really true, and it was a couple of times mentioned that first of all you have to have the water in order to think about the financing, but at the same time you have to consider and have to think what should be the source of financing, and for what we are using this water. And in this respect, considering the sources of the country, what we have the enough source as a water in order to use to be used for the households in respect of the of course for the irrigation also, but at the same time it is really important to consider that this is the water what should be used for the economy, for the country economy, and at the same time considering everything into mind on this, we have to think who have to pay for the water, which is really challenging, and at the same time when we are talking about the paying for the water, but we have to consider what should be the cost of the water and who have to pay, first of all, and definitely it could not be enough for the paying for the population or paying for the businesses in order to cover all kind of cost what is needed. at least for the maintenance and for the operation of this water. And in this respect, definitely, these today's discussions and this theme of this roundtable is really key and very important for us in order to properly understand and properly see what should be the source of the financing, and at the same time, how these finances should be properly managed. But before we thinking on this, definitely this is something on which we have to see that what kind of regulation in the country exists. And in this respect, I'm really pleased to say that last year we adopted the law on the water management, and this is fully in line with the EU regulations. And what is really important for us that this is the first law which really changed all kind of structure and will change the all kind of structure about the water management. And in this respect, I have to highlight that this newly adopted law, as I mentioned, is fully aligned with the EU Water Framework Directive, but at the same time, it covers all kind of directive and all kind of elements which are already in the Urban Wastewater Directive, the Drinking Water Directive, the Nutrient Directive, and of course the EU Flood Directive. This is something on which we have to consider in mind when we are talking about the water policy, water uses, and water utilities also on this respect. I represent the Ministry of Regional Development and Infrastructure of the country, who is really in charge of the water supply, potable water supply, and of course the sanitation. And in this respect, I have to mention that our goal is that to have the water supply in the cities, in all cities by the end of 2025, and in all countries by the end of 2030. It seems just data, it seems just our goal, but it really needs a lot of financing. And when we are talking about the financing and about our goal, definitely we are not talking about the water supply, but sanitation, which is really especially essential, not only on the environmental side, but of course it's really applies to all citizens, and not only citizens of the country, but of course on the regions, and of course on the whole countries. And when we are talking about the water supply, definitely it is really in line with our development, sustainable development goals, but at the same time, when we are talking about the new laws and new regulations, this is something on which we firstly bring in our life these river basis management mechanisms. And what is really important that in this respect, the country is split it in the couple of river bases approaches, and in this respect, the respective management plans are either under the implementation or on the final stage, or even in the place of to be adopted. And when we are talking about the country, what kind of challenges we have in respect of the financing of this kind of new regulations, and it was really mentioned today morning, and I'm sure that it will be raised a couple of times, not only the couple of times during these today's meetings. What can be the source of the financing? This is really under question mark, and in this respect, we have to think the proper usage of our resources. And in this respect, I have to mention that we are very much focusing on the significant reduction of the losses, both on the technical and financial side, and certain measures are already applied and will be extended on the further. And our goal is that by the end of 2030 to reduce the losses and to have it less than 20%. It's really big in respect of the country, and I'm sure in our our neighboring countries. And this is something which is really challenging all the countries. I also want to mention one very important issue about the efficiency and sustainability and the smart solutions on the water usage, and at the same time respect of the not only the potable water. And in this respect, we think that along the development of the hard infrastructure, soft management systems like the SCADA are being applied. And even as I mentioned that the last year the new law was adopted, and the main chapters will be into force, will start, the active implementation should be will enter from the 2026. What we have already starting the implementation of the law, and considering the issue of this, we really want to accelerate the process in order to make effective much more earlier than it is envisaged on this. Once again, I'm really pleased to be part of this today's discussions, and hope that we will have a lot of questions, and at the same time the responses and answers to our questions on this, and looking forward for the having more deep discussions during these 2 days. Thank you very much, and looking forward for our cooperation and for our future discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. It's good to see you again. We last met in January within the frame of a multi-stakeholder national policy dialogue on water, where we explored some of these issues in quite some detail. And we'll hear more about it in the agenda, particularly about surface water abstraction charges and managing some of the political and social risks around it. So very interesting. Thank you. Our next speaker, we're going to go online, and I'm delighted to welcome Irina Punga, who is Deputy Secretary-General of the Ministry of Environment of Moldova. Irina, do you hear us? Are you there?
Yes, I hear
Excellent.
you.
Right, we see you in the room. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Honored audience, dear partners and colleagues, we greatly appreciate the opportunity to participate in this event, which we are convinced will strengthen our efforts in the recent period to invest in the field of water resources, thereby accelerating our alignment with your requirements. As a candidate state for your accession, the Republic of Moldova is at an advanced stage of screening and analysis of our regulatory framework, which includes the assessment of our institutional capacities. Last week, the European Commission held an explanatory screening session for environmental chapter, where it detailed the EU acts, outlined the priority actions to be taken, and specified the necessary assessment to be conducted. And at this stage, it is very clear that the water sector demands considerable investments and presents a significant challenge for our country. However, we are committed to making progress, investing in adequate infrastructure, developing quality services for our population, and most importantly, implementing measures that contribute to the improvement of our water resources. This event will facilitate a comprehensive exchange of the specific challenges and opportunities that Eastern Partnership countries, including the Republic of Moldova, face in financing water initiatives. Understanding the experience and strategies of neighboring countries will help us to identify best practices and enabling us to optimize our approach to water resource management and investment. By engaging with a diverse range of stakeholders, including public and private actors, financial institutions, investors, we can explore innovative solutions to scale up investments in the water sector. Also, by discussing innovative financial approach and ensuring the financial sustainability of our water With utilities, we can build a resilient and efficient water sector that meets both current and future demands. So through shared knowledge, strategic partnership, and innovative solution, we are confident that we can overcome the challenges in the water sector and move closer to our goal of EU accession. So only together we can ensure a sustainable future for all our water resources. Thank you very much for your attention, and let's have a great event these 2 days.
Irina, thank you very much and great to see you. So our final speaker in this opening panel, we know what a crucial issue water is, touching all areas of the economy, the environment and society. And the role of NGOs and civil society is crucial in the planning and implementation of water sector developments. So I'm pleased to welcome Ruslan Gavrilyuk, who is going to speak on behalf of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. That is an umbrella organisation working with over 1,000 organisations in EAP countries. And Ruslan was nominated from Ukraine to join us today. So Ruslan, please welcome. The floor is yours.
Dear Mr. Matthew, dear Chair, dear representatives of the EU and Eastern Partnership, OECD, dear colleagues, I'm really honored to be here today on behalf of Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum and to share our perspective on how to enhance regional cooperation on water financial. Environmental and climate resilience, promotion, fair and inclusive societies are among priorities of Eastern Partnership agenda, including improving water quality, water resources management, fair distribution and access to drinking water, and many other issues related to water finance are among the main priorities of civil society in our country, I mean Eastern Partnership country. Our societies have been facing many challenges in the field of water resources, which have been exacerbated in recent decades by climate change and growing anthropogenic pressure as well. In many cases, the situation has become crucial both with our countries and at the international level, regional level. For example, there has been a strong business interest in construction of small and large, as well hydroelectrical power plants in light of the transition to RES. It has caused high tension in all our Eastern Partnership countries without exception. And I am pleased to mention that Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum has contributed to solving this problem by promoting the concept of ecosystem services. There were other examples of successful solutions to water management problems. However, Russian full-scale war against Ukraine has destroyed these positive changes, just as it has destroyed our water bodies, water resources. The impact of Russian aggression is not limited to Ukraine. You have seen the video from Ukraine Ministry. The Black Sea ecosystem has suffered as a result of Kakhovka tragedy. In the recent months, the Dniester River in both Ukraine and Moldova has been affected by intense Russian shelling and the critical energy situation in my country. This also creates unprecedented risks and challenges in the context of Ukraine's recovery. restoring water infrastructure. Ukraine needs more support as Russia's ongoing war towards Ukraine is daily reminder of the threats to EAP region. There needs to allocate investment on water-related sectors in line with EAP agenda. Ensuring environmental security, including water security, means safeguarding human health and promotion economic growth in our countries. Investment should focus on environmental governance and implementation of environmental laws, including on water management. EAP countries should increase their capacity to enhance the attraction of sustainable investment by both private and business actors. Regarding reforms, the EU member states and EU water acquis best practice should be considered not only in framework of the enlargement agenda, also relevant successful experience and best practice of our countries should be taken into consideration and shared across the region. Regarding civil society participation, last but not least, I think, civil society across Eastern Partnership region is still too often excluded from effective participation in policy making. It should be involved at all levels: consultation, policy formulation, implementation, and monitoring. For instance, we call on proper public participation in river basin management, including the participation in implementation of river basin management plans. Responsible ministries and institutions should actively cooperate with civil society, and investment should be allocated accordingly. We call on project on water management with involvement of the EAP and EU civil society, and funding allocated to public campaigns on the implementation of relevant environmental legislation, including of water financial management by civil society organization. Also, EAP Civil Society Forum should be part of project under the framework of EU, OECD, World Bank, and under other relevant programs. Thank you very much for your attention. Looking forward to continue to engage with your support, our shared values.
Many thanks, Ruslan. And everyone, that concludes our first panel session. So thank you to all our speakers today. Thank you so much. And then we just need kind of a minute or two to flip the stage. So I'd invite speakers for the next panel, Ord, Gunther, James, David and Jürgen to get ready to come to the stage, please. Thank you, everyone. ready whenever you are. We can... Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start our first panel session in the context of our roundtable today. Good morning to all of you. First of all, welcome to Brussels for those of you who have come all the way to Belgium. We are very happy to welcome you here. My name is Geraldo Daz. I work at the European Commission, in DG NEAR, where I'm responsible for our regional programs in the Eastern Partnership, and where together with my team, we are managing a wide portfolio of cooperation projects covering many policy areas, including environment and water. I will have the pleasure of moderating this first panel discussion this morning. So in the opening addresses that we just heard this morning, I think the panelists have already excellently set the scene for our 1.5 day discussion. They have touched upon many very interesting aspects of water financing. We heard about the need to a number of questions were asked about how we mobilize financing for the implementation of the European water acquis. How do we ensure predictable revenue streams for water investment projects? How do we structure environmental funds for water management? How do we attract private sector financing and leverage our public funding? So all these issues will be further addressed in the panel sessions that we will have in the next day and a half. The first session that I will have the pleasure to moderate now is going to start exploring some of these and provide answer to some of these questions. The topic of this panel discussion is how to improve investment decisions for the implementation of the EU water legislation. In this panel, we will learn from our EU member states, but also from our financial and academic experts on how to structure environmental funds to support water management. The exchange of views and ideas we are going to have this morning will also provide the opportunity to identify future public and private financing opportunities, particularly related to climate change, and to discuss the strategic sequencing of water-related investments. So if you allow me, I would like to introduce our panelists this morning. I will start with Ms. Aude Farneau, who is coming from the OECD. She's a water policy analyst at the Environmental Directorate of the OECD. Aude has contributed to several OECD publications developed in partnership with the European Commission in the context of our EU for Environment program, and she's also the coordinator of the Roundtable on Financing Water. Aude, welcome. With us today, we also have Mr. Günther Liebel, who is the former Secretary General from the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Regions and Water Management of Austria. As you know, Austria has been a significant actor in the EU's support to the Eastern Partnership countries through our current EU for Environment program, but also in the past under the EU for Water Initiative program. Welcome, Mr. Liebel. Thanks for coming. Another key member of the panel is Mr. James Hunt, who's a senior engineer at the Water Division of the European Investment Bank, which is the EU bank. We're very happy to have you with us this morning. Thank you so much. Another esteemed colleague is Mr. David Tyler from the EBRD. You are Associate Director at the EBRD, and you are the head of the Project Preparation and Implementation Division of EBRD. And you come with a wealth of experience into devising technical and strategic solutions to support water sector investments. Good morning and welcome to you too. And last but not least, we have Mr. Jürgen Keinhorst, who is the head of division for Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. That's a very wide regional coverage at the Federal Ministry of Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety. Welcome to you, and thank you for joining us this morning. So if you allow me, I would like to start with you, Odd. I understand that you will talk about about the recent OECD work, including a very interesting study on financing gap for EU member states and the EU water acquis. So I'm very happy to give you the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So dear ministers, dear participants, it's a great pleasure to be here today in Brussels for the 11th meeting of the Roundtable on Financing Water. We were in Abidjan 6 months ago, so it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm going to share with you a few messages about water economics and water finance to achieve compliance with the EU water regulation. So in 2020, the OECD and the European Commission DG Environment joined forces to examine current and future water financing challenges faced by EU member states. Some of the takeaways from this study included the fact that investment needed for water supply and sanitation by 2030 to achieve compliance with relevant EU water directives is estimated at around 289 billion euros. Sanitation represents the bulk of total additional expenditures needed. And on a country level, all member states need to increase annual expenditures for water supply and sanitation by more than 25% in order to reach and maintain compliance with the selected directive, with the exception of Germany, which is a bit below 25%. At the higher end of additional investment needs, Romania and Bulgaria need to double or more the current level of investment. So this is to say that achieving and maintaining compliance with EU water directives is really a challenge for all EU member states. So that's why the European Commission, DG Environment and the OECD embarked on a joint project to provide practical guidance to EU member states and support further progress towards robust water economics to inform water resource management, with the objective of ultimately facilitating compliance with the Water Framework Directive and the Flood Directive. Analysis and policy messages are relevant to a broader audience and to EAP countries. So I'm going to share with you some of our messages from the work we did, specifically on cost recovery, on the polluter-pays principles, on the economics of water scarcity, and on water investment planning and financing. So on cost recovery first. So you know that a high level of financial cost recovery reduces the claim on public financial support and promotes access to private finance sources. And in addition to that, pricing can be a signal to incentivize water use efficiently, but with the condition that it needs to be embedded in a comprehensive and balanced policy package. So therefore, policy instruments need to be accompanied by measures to address affordability. So this was one of our key message on cost recovery. We worked a lot as well on the polluter pays principle, which is a requirement to reach the Water Framework Directive goals and as well the European Green Deal. Diffuse pollution and legacy pollution are difficult challenges to address for member states. There are diverse approaches for addressing them under the Water Framework Directive, and alignment with the polluter pays principle varies significantly between countries. Analysis should consider linkages with other sectors and issues like climate change and territorial development, and extended producer responsibility for contaminants of emerging concern support the application of the polluter pays principle. So we've made some recommendation around that, and happy to discuss this further with you. On the economics of water scarcity, which is hardly new in Europe, but has recently emerged as a pan-European challenge, discussions has revived attention to water allocation regimes, which are often inherited from times of plenty and thus in need of reform. Existing guidance on environmental flows needs to be more thoroughly implemented. Clear definition and stringent enforcement can help, and water allocation regimes are expected to deliver better results in combination with water scarcity pricing. So in a context characterized by mounting uncertainties about water availability and use, as well as the exposure and vulnerability to water risks, investment decisions would benefit from better planning. In particular, member states would benefit from more guidance on scenario analysis, in particular in relation to climate change and associated crises. Planning could also be improved by supplementing project-level analysis with those at the level of strategic investment pathways. And when it comes to finance for measures and water investments, new sources of finance could be attracted through fair risk-sharing arrangements. A lot of cross-cutting issues, which are relevant for EAP countries, including significant differences in the application of economic instruments among member states, including equity and environmental justice under the Water Framework Directive, were also addressed. I will not develop them here for the sake of time, but I would be happy to discuss this further with you. So to conclude my intervention, a few words about the OECD and European Commission collaboration on water issues. We've been collaborating very closely for several decades. I've mentioned the collaboration with DG Environment. It included as well work on the economics of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, on performance of utilities for wastewater collection and treatment. The OECD worked as well with DG Reform, for instance, in Estonia and Lithuania. The work with these countries offers lessons to EIP countries on the benefits and modalities of economic regulation to enhance the efficiency of development and investment plans and the operation of water utilities. It supported national policy dialogues on why and how to achieve economies of scale through agglomeration of municipalities. Policy recommendations through this work pointed at improvement in scale and size of projects and ultimately attracting finance to projects to stronger municipality teams with the appropriate capacities. And these findings and recommendations are key to the work that the OECD has been doing over many years with DG NIR as well in Eastern partner countries. Later in today's agenda, we will hear how this work has informed national and regional projects and dialogues to promote more sustainable water management. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Odd, for your intervention. So thank you in particular for putting hard figures on what we heard earlier this morning, that compliance with the EU legislation and the EU directive is costly indeed. You mentioned 289 billion euros of investments needed for the European Union only. So we can understand the challenge that it represents also for our Eastern partners. And thank you also for highlighting a number of aspects that are important, notably on cost recovery, on the need to price water usage fairly, to not only to ensure cost recovery, but also to attract private capital. I think these are very important points. Without further ado, if you allow me, because I realize we are already behind schedule, I would like to invite you, Günther, to come in. We are very delighted to have you with us. Austria, as I said earlier, has been a key actor providing technical expertise in support of our cooperation with our Eastern partners. And we would be very eager to hear and to learn more about Austria's experience in financing the Water Framework Directive and its all associated directives. Over to you, please.
Thanks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a great pleasure to be here. And thanks for inviting Austria. And I was asked to provide some information about the situation in Austria, and I brought with me some slides. I will start with a definition which just came up in 23 from Water Europe. Water Europe, this organization you know quite well, and this is a definition who gives us clear guidance for the future. What is a water smart society? You can read it. You can read it out in the brochures of Water Europe. But what are the main drivers for the future? And from my personal view, the main drivers for the future will be climate change, because climate change will affect all water resources. We will have heavy precipitation, droughts, fire weather. Hydropower and nuclear power will be under pressure. Drinking water systems, wastewater systems have to be evaluated. Agriculture and forestry, but also industry has to find new ways. And that means, and it's a little bit a conclusion, that we need really a strategic plan for all water resources and users, including financing for a secure and resilient water system. We have heard about EU legislation. There is a long list of EU legislation. I think we do not need more legislation in Europe, but what we have to do is to proper implement the existing legislation within the future, because that will help quite a lot. Some information about the situation in Austria. We just published a study with the title Austria's Water Treasure, because we think water is a treasure, and you know that we are a water-rich country. But we had a look on the effects of climate change. We used the scenarios of the Austrian Climate Change Committee for the next 15 years, and the situation is dramatic, because this is the situation right now. 70% of the water resources are used by the industry, 24% water supply. And the result is that we will have an increase in the water demand, but we will have a decrease of the groundwater in Austria up to 23% in 2050. This is dramatic, and that means that Austria has to evaluate the Austrian water policy. It must be modernized, and we are still on the way, because we are starting a strategic plan for the future. Financing the water sector in Austria, we are financing drinking water, wastewater, national hazard management, irrigation as a part of the common agriculture policy, hydropower, and so on and so on. What is the situation about the drinking and the wastewater services? We have at around 5,500 private drinking water suppliers. Very small ones. They have to take care about the drinking water situation, and the amount of the state funding depends on the financial situation of these drinking water suppliers. And there is a rule saying higher funding is for smaller and poorer companies, organizations. Larger companies, they have their own system, and they are not funded within this whole system. There is a funding system which is in line between the federal state and the provinces. And if you have to look on the last lines, what about the fees? The average fee for a cubic meter of drinking water, including the wastewater, is between 5 and 7 euros. And we think this is a fair price, and these prices are socially accepted in Austria. So this is just to give you a glimpse of information. What is about flood prevention? We heard a lot in the morning. We also fund these things. In Austria, the communities are responsible for flood prevention, but we subsidize them, and the funding varies from 40 to 80%. We have around 150 million euros a year available for this system. And additionally, of course, restoration is important for the river systems. We just finished 220 ecological river restoration projects within the last years. Investment in water infrastructure, we have a very, very long tradition. We started in 1959, and since then more than 65 billion euros have been invested in the water infrastructure. But there is about a third of the existing drinking water system is older than 50 years, so we have to invest especially in the maintenance and in new facilities. And climate change stimulates for a quicker investment. We also invest in training for staff. Every year around 2,000 persons, staff from the drinking water and the wastewater system are trained because there are new technologies, there's a new legislation, and there is an administrative developments, and this training is essential to keep the system running. This is done by private companies. We are cooperating with them, and it is essential really to keep the system running when the staff is trained. On the other hand, awareness raising is important. Our ministry is running quite a lot of different public awareness campaigns. We have a tailored one for pupils from 8 to 16 years. It's called Generation Blue. And on the other hand, we have an official state water award with the name Neptune, the Greek god of water. And here, every 2 years, the best projects of local communities, science, and so on are awarded. There's quite a lot of international cooperation. And to sum up, to keep in time, what is the conclusion? The conclusion is that for us and for me, climate change is still the main driver for the future development. The drinking and wastewater systems are under pressure. Irrigation for agriculture needs a new and stronger political discussion within the common agriculture policy. Public value of water is important, and we have to raise awareness for water security. And coming to the end, we have a very long tradition in the water system, and Austria stands ready to share our experience with other countries, and especially with the Eastern European Partnership. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Günther, for sharing Austria's experience and strategic thinking about water management and water resources. I really appreciate that you made also the link with climate change, which is a binding constraint for all of us. What I take away from your presentation is how Austria is able to manage water resources in the context of a very decentralized system, from what I understand, but also how you are able to modulate the pricing according to you know, the social split in the country to ensure equitable access to water. Thank you so much for that. I would like now to invite our next speaker, James Hunt, to speak. I don't know if you want to come to the podium, otherwise you could stay there. So James, again, as I said, you come from the European Investment Bank. You come also with a wealth of experience in water investments. And we would like to hear from you some of your observation through your work on priorities for mobilizing finance for water in the Eastern Partnership countries. Over to you.
All makes me sound terribly grand, doesn't it? I'm not. Before I joined the European Investment Bank, I was on the other side of the fence. I was preparing feasibility studies, sometimes in your countries, for projects to be financed by many of the people in this room. So what I'm going to do is say a few words as an employee of the European Investment Bank. I'm then going to say a few words as me, because I was actually involved in negotiating the wording of the Water Framework Directive 20-odd years ago when I represented the British government. Okay, James Hunt, European Investment Bank. I'm from the United Kingdom, so I have to apologise, A, for my English, and B, for the jokes. Okay, right. So the bank is a group, and it's big. I'll go through these quickly. It has an arm, or is it a leg, called EIB Global, which deals with non-EU partners, given that the EIB, the EU Climate Bank, does most of its business inside Europe. So we also do a great deal of work in the water sector, around about 3 billion euros per annum in loan finance. Most of that, again, is inside the EU. We have, like most organizations, policy documents galore, and they make very interesting reading. But one of the things we have realized is that there is an enormous value in project preparation. And I'll come on to that in a moment. We have projects, well, we have done and we are doing projects. This is Armenia, Georgia, Moldova. And of course, I have to, at this meeting, express our solidarity with Ukraine and to confirm that colleagues who would like to be here but can't be because they're in the process of negotiating further financial support for Ukraine, with whom I'm sure we all stand. That's the EIB bit over. This is the old bloke who's been around a bit moment. Anybody who thinks European environmental legislation is perfect should go and attend the negotiations. It is a compromise between 3 institutions and the member states. If the Water Framework Directive was perfect, we wouldn't have needed the Flood Risk Management Directive. It would have already been integrated. So let's just apply a little bit of realism about this heap of legislation we call the acquis. It has been a tremendous driver for a tremendous amount of good. But like most things in this world, it is not without fault. So when considering compliance and alignment, a little care should be taken. There are opportunities to take advantage of lessons learned. So the river-based management planning in the Water Framework Directive is not fully integrated. And it doesn't deal very well with water resources. My colleague from Austria suggested that full implementation of the EU legislation would resolve that problem. Interesting that the European Commission recently launched, or rather didn't launch, a water resilience initiative. I understand that may have been the result of a complaint from certain quarters within the EU community. There is an issue, there's an opportunity that others who are not fully bound yet by the EU acquis can leapfrog and take the best and leave the rest, if you like. Yeah? Now, we talk endlessly about investment. When we do the financial models for these projects, we look not only at the investment, but at the operational cost, at the reinvestment cost, the depreciation, if you like. We look at the lifetime. So these big numbers, 289 billion? Is that right? How many people in the EU? 450 million, let's say. 600 euros per person. You can't even buy an iPhone for that. So there needs to be some thinking about water as a priority, I agree. But there isn't as our first speaker said, an endless amount of finance. We will never have enough money. We never do, by definition. So we have to prioritize. And how are we going to go about doing that? What we're going to do is we're going to use the tools inside the acquis, river basin management planning, but done in an integrated fashion. And what does an integrated river basin management plan look like? It's one that covers water resources, it covers water scarcity, it includes a climate projection, it is resilient. And as our colleague from civil society said, it engages with water users who have rights, farmers being one amongst many. Options analysis. When you get a project financed, you have to put a feasibility study in. One of the worst chapters of every feasibility study is options analysis. We will talk about nature-based solutions tomorrow. They get ignored completely half the time. Oh, did you think about using a nature-based solution? No. You should, because they're extremely cost-effective. I think I'll stop there, because if I don't, coffee will be delayed. I thank you all for your attention and for not reporting me to the president of the bank for stepping outside my duly assigned duties. Have a good day.
Thank you, James, for highlighting the imperfection of the EU legislative framework so well. No, but we hear you on the importance of considering all possible options and solutions whenever we talk about water investments. Now I would like to invite David Tyler from the EBRD to the stage and to share with us also his experience into investment into water projects. Please.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting the EBRD, another English gentleman from a sister organisation, and I will focus a little less on some of the challenges. We've heard a lot already. I will also focus on some of the opportunities. I will raise a case study of a nature-based solution, but also touch on our flagship programme, the Green Cities, which has relevance because we are moving to a more urbanised society. The EBRD has been, since its inception, has been financing water projects in multiple dimensions consistently in that regard. And we think we offer some of our experience now. So, I think I drive this. Okay, this is a very busy slide, but let me tiptoe through. We've heard already there are multiple challenges. I echo that climate change will additionally amplify those water-related events. We already see issues of too much water, too little water, and what's rising up the agenda, thank you, what's rising up the agenda is deteriorating water quality, which the World Bank highlighted recently as the invisible crisis. We've heard already from a number, but at a global scale, to meet the requirements of the United Nations SDG 6, which is access to drinking water and safe sanitation. The shortfall, well, to meet that is around 1.7 trillion, of which around a third is being invested. So we know that there's an awful lot to do, and that does not cover legacy underinvestment. The sector is also characteristically both capital and revenue intensive. We have short, medium and long-term assets. They all need maintaining. We've heard those that are coming to the end of their life. We observe that the consequence of legacy underinvestment is just simple deterioration of services. And often what we do is when we step in with our countries of operation, that legacy investment is so bad that we actually have to invest in total system replacement in order to restore services. whilst globally good progress has been made, we do note that actually there are remote and rural areas that remain the most challenging. And that's partly because the cost of providing services to these communities is disproportionately costly. We know economic growth often coincides with high water consumption, manufacturing, construction. We also know through our projects that if we take people from standpipes to water in their homes, consumption goes up significantly, from roughly 40 litres per head per day to around 140 to 200 litres per head per day. We observe that there's often insufficient public financing, competing priorities. We often also see low interest from the private sector, and that's a complicated picture. Over-reliance on central government, emerging economies lacking access to capital markets, etc., etc. We've heard already that if you set tariffs too low, you just won't get the income to basically finance the sector. And anyway, many governments often see the water sector as a public service and is very heavily, historically, dependent on government subsidies. And then we face features such as fragmentation, multiple stakeholders, government agencies, and it confuses the picture. It leads us to overlapping mandates, inconsistent policies, a lack of accountability. The second thing we often see is, and actually echoed by Ruslan, who mentioned about the importance of CSOs, that you need to have meaningful stakeholder engagement for effective water management. And then there's political interference. Often we see, the impact that politicians have in prioritising short-term gains over long-term planning and investment. The sector isn't particularly sexy. We do know that there's actually decreasing, beyond just efficiency, there's decreasing interest in the sector alone, but little lights of shall we say, seeds of growth in both green infrastructure and digitalisation, which is really encouraging to see. And we've also heard the impact that fragile systems, further impacted by situations such as the Russian aggression, displacing around 13.5 million people, both within Ukraine but also outside, and impacting on neighbouring countries, Moldova and Romania in particular. And our experience also in natural disasters, so Turkey and Morocco last year, really again just highlighting how the impact of natural disasters have on people and water sector services. So what can we do? Well, there's a lot that we can do. We can, as has been echoed and it's encouraging, it's on the agenda, we can support the transition to a green and circular water economy. We need to, yes, promote water efficiency and renewable energy, but actually go a bit further than that and promote resource recovery and reuse solutions. As an institution, yes, we need to continue to invest in good quality infrastructure, but that also includes non-conventional solutions, and increasingly we need to look at water reuse and desalination as legitimate, cost-efficient options. We need to support our clients by increasing their financial performance, financial and operational performance. So interesting that our Austrian colleague there, was it 5,500 entities? So we need to consider, we need to consider things like commercialization, corporatization, regionalization, encouraging more efficiencies, implementing tariff reforms, and encouraging increasing private sector participation where they can add legitimate value. And of course, building resilience in the water sector. So yes, supporting climate change adaptation, institutional reforms, but also helping our clients in their emergency and contingency planning. That leads me to our Green Cities programme, which we launched in 2016. It's a strategic initiative. It aims at supporting cities to look multi-dimensionally at a number of sectors, but focusing on solving green, low-carbon and resilient ambitions. And you can see the statistics really speak for themselves. We've mobilised around 5 billion euros in investment. We're active in around 60 cities. They're city-owned led plans that provide a bit more of a systematic and comprehensive approach to addressing their environmental challenges. And it's triggered, and the key feature here is each has to have a trigger project, so it's triggering investment and follow-on investments, and in a number of cases that includes the water sector. One such example is, and I'm very pleased to see we've got our Moldovan colleagues here, is the River Bic in Chisinau in Moldova. It required investment, and it's part of the Green Cities programme. It's one of the trigger projects. It required investment due to its degraded condition. It posed significant flood risk and some environmental concerns. And we financed the first phase of a two-phase project to address these issues. And it has a number of features. So first, together with the EIB, we both provided 8 million euros. There was an additional grant of 4 million from the Green Climate Fund. And its primary role very much was to to improve the climate resilience by reducing flood risk, both in the river system and the connected urban water, stormwater drainage system, and upgrade the blue-green corridor along the River Bic. It aims to restore the natural environment, which is currently polluted and mismanaged, improve the water quality, and reduce the impervious areas that we often see in cities. And by doing so, implementing the beginnings of some novel nature-based solutions, retrofitting sustainable urban drainage systems, tree pits, for example. So, beyond the immediate flood protection, the project supports the ambitions of the city to create an attractive asset in that regard, actually bring back and create the river as an amenity feature. And the important point here is that for us to be able to make this a bankable project, we had to go the extra mile to valorise the wider benefits that this project would bring by introducing nature-based components. So what are the opportunities? Well, I think it begins with applying approaches such as circular economy principles to the water sector. There's much more that we can do to minimise waste, optimise resource use, and reduce the impact the environmental impact of the water-related activities. We should stop thinking about wastewater treatment and consider these facilities as resource factories, and actually capitalise, where it's cost efficient to do so, the waste streams. We've heard already actually the importance of applying the principles of integrated water resources management thinking. And we see that as being a way to address these very complex multi-stakeholder issues around water scarcity, water pollution, and water-related disasters. I've mentioned already blue-green infrastructure, and we see that as being, should we say, symbiotic, so it supports an approach with grey infrastructure. And we also are encouraged to see that there is continuous innovations that improve both system efficiency, performance, but also resilience of the water sector. Emerging, we see things like improved water purification technologies, nanofiltration, use of modular, contained and decentralized systems for those smaller rural communities that I mentioned before. The integration of digital transformation is and can be quite transformative. And we know that there are solutions like smart metering and asset monitoring to the use of digital twins, but these can further enhance that efficiency, performance and resilience agenda in that regard. In a sector that's highly electrical energy dependent, there's a lot more that we can do in terms of reducing energy dependency, so introducing renewable energy solutions, energy performance contracting, for example. And what we see in the desalination space are some key areas where the private sector can really make its mark. And that's attractive because of the risk sharing, their ability to actually share their knowledge and provide their private sector expertise in these in these types of solutions. There are several innovative funding mechanisms that have been addressed, including the use of green bonds. I am not an expert on those. And of course, we've heard that there is absolutely, in cases of Turkey, Morocco, Ukraine, the prospect of building back better in that regard. And doing that in a way which maintains good quality infrastructure, but we need to be mindful that to do that needs to equally be affordable, accessible as well. So hopefully my points illustrate, the synergy between the EBRD and the EAP in that regard, and highlighting, our shared commitment to sustainable development, climate resilience, social equity, and increasing institutional strength. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing EBRD's experience and the insights into water project investments. We really appreciate that you also came up with a very concrete example on how we can introduce nature-based solutions into this global framework. I would like to now call Jürgen on stage. Germany has been a key supporter of reform in the Eastern Partnership countries for many years. We also know that in Central Asia specifically, you have a Team Europe initiative on water, and we would like very much to invite you to give us a bit of insights into this initiative and how it goes. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, colleagues, and special thanks to having invited me, as I'm not member of the water family or community, but I'm associated to this. And I would also like to take the opportunity here to thank OECD and EU for long-term close cooperation, especially in this sector. So I do remember that we had the first big conference which was devoted to water in the year 2000 in Tashkent. It was in Almaty, fine. So you see Angela Bulgara from the Commission. She is the one in the room here. No one can compare with this experience, as she was also there from the beginning. And you see that was such a long cooperation continuing. And I can say this as co-chair of this task force in the OECD for Eastern Europe and Central Asia and the Caucasus, but also as a German representative here, that we very much appreciate this. As Germany is mentioned, just a few remarks. Yeah, the key point indeed for investments over all the time was the implementation of the polluter pay principle. But to be also very clear, the water in general is not providing the business case. And insofar, even having implemented the polluter pay principle for the private consumers so that they are in a position to cover the cost under the polluter pay principle, we have anyway huge grant programs in the infrastructure, in the water-related infrastructure, at least in the phase where we have implemented such an infrastructure. And that partly counted for 40 or 50% of the investments. And given the situation that we are now already, I would not say struggling, but at least it is challenging to maintain this infrastructure, the burden is much higher for those countries who first have to build up such an infrastructure. And so far, working on investment plans in this sector is really a challenging task. And I only take this one figure Minister Strelitz gave us this morning, that for their plans, and this is more or less related to the damages, but also with a recovery perspective, he said that they intend to spend 1%, nearly 1% of their GDP per year only for the water sector. So this is an enormous figure. From my work with Ukraine, I do know that they spent for some years just for energy efficiency in the housing sector, just heating, 8% as public subsidies. So you can imagine if you add up such figures on all infrastructure, where all the money should come from. And insofar, it's very important to see it in a wider context, not just the water, but also how it's linked to the different sectors and to do an appropriate priority setting in this regard. And then it becomes also obvious that given the situation now where we have increasing interest, or at least higher interest, so there were times with much higher interest than today, but given the additional cost due to the geostrategical situation, which is also rising the interest rates, there's even more challenging situation for the countries in the Eastern Partnership, but for Central Asia as well. So you can imagine that at the end, the public sector will have some problems to cover all the related costs. And so far, the question is if you can at least develop in one or the other case a business case, or how you can reduce the costs. And this is, of course, in principle feasible by private investors and by foreign direct investments, and especially also via the support of the better financing conditions by the international financing institutions, but also the banking system as such. And this is a critical point where we all have to work in our activities regarding infrastructure in the water sector, but also in other sectors here in the Eastern Partnership countries and in the Central Asian region as well. There's an additional factor, and all the speakers more or less referred also to this point. And nowadays, it's not just about the drinking water infrastructure and the wastewater. It's also about adaptation, as this has also a direct link to the other infrastructure as transport and so on. And maybe this is an area where you can create some synergies, which might be then also allow for a better business case, or at least for lower costs. So the demand side is of crucial relevance as well. So we heard the figures from Austria with 80% water consumption, or nearly 80% for the industrial sector. Maybe in Germany it's similar to this. In other countries, as in the Eastern Partnership, or at least in Central Asia, we have an other ratio with 80% in the agriculture sector, and this provides us with huge opportunities, as in this sector, different from industry, at least in the so-called Western countries, where industry more than the private consumers using just for economic reasons already the efficiency potential. We have a huge energy efficiency potential in the agricultural sector. And this is the reason why we will talk about this also later, in the cooperation with the Eastern Partnership countries in a cooperation project under Team Europe with this region. But we have this Nexus project on water, land use, energy, and climate in Central Asia as well, addressing the agricultural sector and also the agribusiness. And we have good demonstration effects that there we can create a business case to reduce the water consumption dramatically, partly by 80%. And this works without a huge amount of grant money, and maybe can be a business case in its own. And together with these effects, we can generate via synergies with the transport infrastructure, for example. Maybe this is a chance in future or nature-based solutions, and there might be also easier access to the Green Climate Fund or to the Adaptation Fund, at least for those countries eligible for this type of financing, where the region is, by the way, lacking behind other regions to take advantage of these instruments. Such opportunities should be better used in the future. So I was asked also shortly to touch upon on Central Asia. So as this Nexus approach could become very relevant here for the Eastern Partnership region as well. I know already from my colleagues from Georgia that they are very much interested in this. So as there is a chance to modernize also the business in the agro area with new value chain, less water intensive. So once again, the investment topic is mentioned, and the question is how such approaches, apart from technical cooperation, could be supported. And we are now working together with the EBRD on set up of a partnership fund with Central Asia, with the 5 Central Asian countries and Mongolia, to support such activities. And the first examples from a Nexus project there have demonstrated that there's a huge demand, specifically from the agribusiness sector. I already mentioned this example with a reduction of 80% of the water consumption, and maybe this is also an area where we here in the Eastern Partnership region could also cooperate. We from our side, Germany, are very interested to intensify this cooperation and also to further be part of these Team Europe approaches, which we consider as a very important and effective instrument. Then a last word from my side, as we had the Ukrainian delegation with us this morning. In 2 weeks, we have in Berlin the next Ukraine Recovery Conference. So we have from the German side, as we are co-organizers together with Ukraine, set up a specific panel on environment and also on infrastructure. So I do not know if it's for the first time, at least it is perceived as a huge opportunity for the environment community to be there. We will have the minister from Germany, Minister Strelitz, the EU commissioner, there among the panelists. The EBRD will be present as well, and NGOs. And we will address the question how to do the recovery, and then also specifically address the framework conditions. Not to talk about how to implement the 30-something directives in the field of environment, but also to address the financial constitution. So one of the main barriers in most of the countries of the region, so we heard about this cost recovery of only 30% by fees, so that there is more interest in the future for private investors to come in, as without it will not go. And we have to consider ways to do it in a just way, so that the social aspects, which definitely are coming with such discussions, that they're also covered, but that we separate the instruments for investments in infrastructure, specifically water, and other instruments, how to respond to the social needs, as we are all well aware that the question of affordability, not only in the industrial sector, but mainly for the private consumers, is a key policy issues in all the countries, which in the past has prevented many politicians from implementing such type of activities. And this is a situation we have to overcome. And we try together with our friends from Ukraine to set the basis for this. And we think that we all can cooperate more intensively in this regard on such instruments. And this cooperation here, specifically with the OECD and colleagues from the IFIs and the UE, is very valuable in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jürgen, for sharing with us your experience, but also for outlining the scope of your engagement in the water sector in the Eastern Partnership, but also well beyond. I would like to thank all our panelists for sharing all their invaluable experiences and insights into not only the challenges, but also providing solutions when it comes to financing water infrastructure. It's been, I hope, for everyone very, very useful. We are running a bit out of time, but nevertheless, we would like to offer you the opportunity to ask one or two questions. I don't know if anybody wants to come in with a question to our panelists. We would be happy to take one. Okay, I have the impression that everybody's... yes, there is a question in the back. Thank you. Yes. It's still not working, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Great. My question is, to what extent is local financing being considered to finance these projects? So, like in the US or in the Nordics, a lot of this kind of water infrastructure is financed locally. Either the utility itself is a state-owned enterprise or a private entity or a municipal entity, and it raises funds itself. So I'm curious how much that's being looked at in Europe and outside of Europe. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your question. I don't know if anybody would like to take it on the panel. Yes, please, David.
Thank you. I did mention that I'm an engineer, not a banker, but the principle of multilateral development banks, as I understand it, is that we should not crowd out local banks or local investment. In fact, to some extent, we should be regarded as really the institution of last resort, and that our role is to implement and then to scale back. And actually, that's why I was mentioning the importance of not just investment, but in terms of policy, institution, and regulatory reform. So it's a bit of a broad answer in that regard, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, very briefly, as coffee's getting cold, very much agree with David, but I think as far as my institution is concerned, we don't finance small local projects. We give framework loans to national institutions or national development banks who then on-lend, and it's for them to determine the extent to which the involvement of that kind of finance is beneficial, because as David said, we are rather the last resort in that sense. We should be doing ourselves out of a job, shouldn't we? If you think about it logically, development.
Thank you so much. I hope it answered your question. You have one last chance to ask a question. Okay, yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So my name is Dumitru Drumia. I'm from Moldova, but actually I present Civil Society Forum. And certainly my question comes from the civil society. So how do you see a civil society could be involved? What tools, mechanisms could be used in order to attract the civil society to the creating maybe new financial mechanisms? So how it could contribute to the improvement of the financing of the water sector? So, and how could be measured this efficiency of the involvement of the civil society in the improvement of the financing mechanisms, which could lead to general improvement of the water management? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't know if maybe some of our member states have experiences working with civil society organizations. Otherwise, I'm happy to.
Yeah, if you have a look on the situation in Austria, that's quite clear, because the competence with all this for the drinking water system, sewage water system, flood prevention, lies within the communities. And the communities, they have to take care that all the community members, all the civil science, is involved when they are preparing a project, asking the federal state for funding. So it's always a local project. They have to take care about their financial resources. They get some funding from the federal state. But if they need additional money, they go to a private bank, normally to a local bank, asking for a loan. And in all these discussions, the civil society on the community level is very much involved, because there's normally a pressure from the civil society to have a good drinking water system, to have a good flood prevention. And this guarantees, in our case, that civil society is involved in financing the water system.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Well, really, there was just back to my two points. First, I mentioned our program of green cities, and that, because that is led at the municipal level, has very much the involvement of civil society organizations at the core of understanding priorities at a community level. So where we are involved in those, do engage yourself. The second, and it's a bit of a pitch, is that we have a draft infrastructure sector strategy that's being developed by the EBRD. And again, that's launching on the 10th of June. And we very much welcome, and in fact, we have outreach to all our known civil society organizations, and would dearly welcome your validation on what we've done well and what we could do better over the next 5 years in the infrastructure space.
Thank you so much, David, for this answer.
Tony, in terms of planning, the EU legislation is extremely good in requiring civil society engagements and consultation in the planning process. That's one of the good bits to take. Don't leave that out. The other thing I would say is that when there's a potential for an increase in tariffs, that's something that it is well worthwhile discussing with civil society, because the last thing you want is customers getting a hugely increased water bill through their door and having no idea why they're having to pay more. If they understand why, they're likely to pay the bill. If they don't, they'll be reluctant. Really simple.
Thank you so much, James. I think it answers beautifully the question from our colleagues from the Civil Society Forum. On that point, I think I will have to close the panel, right, Matthew? And I think we...
20 minutes, so back at 10 to...
All right, so we have 20 minutes for a coffee break, which is waiting for you outside, and we'll resume in 20 minutes then. Thank you so much.
Yeah.